Hi, and welcome to Tealium's Digital Virtualocity 2021. We're thrilled that you've chosen to join us today, and you get special bonus points if you can say Digital Virtualocity 5 times fast, which I really cannot do and won't even try, actually. My name is Gabrielle Hase, and I'm chuffed, as they say here in the UK, to join you today for a quick conversation about the art and science of great customer experience, and why it's about more than simply joining the dots. But first, a little bit of context about me. Although I'm joining you today from London, you may guess that I am not English. In fact, I grew up in Pennsylvania and spent a lot of my time in New York City before moving to the UK 15 years ago. And since then, I have been working with brands and retailers like you on helping them launch and grow your online businesses. And that's really become much more now about understanding how digital affects the user experience, both online and off. And I think we can all agree that this past even, going on 18 months now, has been daunting to say the least. And most of us have never lived through anything like this before. I know I certainly haven't. And in the UK, our NHS witnessed 10 years of change in 1 week, and the virus destroyed countless lives and businesses. I mean, it's changed consumer behavior to be a shadow of its former self, but we will see a reemergence of what this new experience looks like and why it's a really great opportunity for all of us here today to really change the rules of engagement and create brands that mean so much more to our consumers than they ever did before. What we do know is that 2021 requires a very different sort of business because we're facing a different sort of world. And thinking about you and your customers, think about measuring engagement by the overall picture of interactions. I mean, not the least of which is the actual sale, but understanding that is the key to winning in 2021. And I'm here today to prove that. What we do know is things are not going back to normal. And COVID has evolved industries and customers. You've seen it, I've seen it. And the pandemic has showed us that working from home actually works. 3/4 of employees surveyed in Germany, India, and the US were found to be at least as productive in performing their individual tasks as they were before COVID. A survey done a year ago showed that virtual is a fact of life, and also that US workers want a mix of home and office working. And Google announced that roughly 200,000 of their employees would continue to work from home until this summer. And Twitter told its employees that they can stay home indefinitely. And I know a lot of the businesses I'm working with have really come to grips with what this new hybrid way of working looks like in practice. So another way to look at this, I read a really interesting article in the Harvard Business Review by Sarah Wilson, who took a look at how consumers, particularly millennials, are now converging to have these conversations. So she thought about looking at public-facing platforms and broke them up into what she calls digital campfires. She identified 3 digital campfires that it's useful for us to consider when we look at how brands are engaging with consumers. The first is private messaging. That is, across platforms like WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram. And a lot of brands are starting to use WhatsApp to foster a closer communication. I mean, did you know that 80% of messages sent to WhatsApp are seen within 5 minutes? Globe Air, which is a European private jet operator, found that posting their WhatsApp number on their website led to a 27% increase in sales leads from visitors initiating chats. The second digital campfire is micro communities. Think about Glossier setting up a Slack channel for its very best customers, where they get to share tips with each other and also mine that community for advice about what new products they should bring out. And actually, they credit this micro community with helping them co-create their milky jelly cleanser. And a third micro community is a shared experience, such as multiplayer video game Fortnite, which you see here. This is a still from this massive online game. It has 200 million users, and up to 8 million at any one time are playing. I mean, it's a social network in its own right. Half of teens say they use it to socialize with friends, some of whom they've never met in person. And a lot of teens are spending 6 to 10 hours each week on the platform. And in fact, it's not just teens. And last year, recording artist Marshmello staged a virtual concert inside the game that 10.7 million people attended. I mean, this goes beyond entertainment. This is really about creating a community and shared experiences. So stepping away from the digital campfires and looking a bit more broadly about what the environment is that your consumer is living in right now, a study by PwC showed that 69% of people say COVID has made them more focused on their mental health and well-being. McKinsey found that 75% of US customers are trying new shopping behavior, and 36% are shifting loyalties and trying new brands. And 73% of those intend to stick with these brands ongoing. And those are some pretty significant shifts. McKinsey also did a study of US consumers that showed that the US shoppers intend to shop online even once it's all over. And we could see up to 35% growth in medicine, groceries, household supplies, and personal care products in buying online. And personally, I think that number is going to be a lot bigger. People are shopping online. They will go back to offline, but a lot more now are more comfortable with the convenience and the security that shopping online gives them. So what does this new relationship look like? Well, it's about investing in lifetime value. Now more than ever, consumers want to connect with a brand on a human and emotional level, and they expect to talk to someone, whether on the phone, via chat, or even video or in real life. A recorded voice message urging people to check the website for answers to frequently asked questions just doesn't cut it anymore. And it's really about ensuring that the customer experience is solid, personalized, and localized. So we've really witnessed a monumental change in these interactions. So going from transactional to relationship-based, and brands are playing a different role in consumers' lives now. We've also found that people want to invest in businesses whose values reflect their own, so they can feel good about their purchases rather than feel guilty about investing in a brand that may have publicly mistreated employees, suppliers, or customers. And I think we've all seen headlines about various brands who've done a little bit of each of those things over the last year and a half, which really has been about the whole lifetime, but it's just kind of come to light. So Deloitte found in its Retail Trends 2020 report that an authentic purpose is now as important as digital is to the next generation of consumers. So what this means is you need to have a story to tell, and transparency and honesty in who you are and what you do and what your values are. It means examining how a brand impacts the economy and society and people's lives. It has to be bigger than profits. It should be about improving lives, not just sales. So let's consider some examples that we saw of this through COVID. We found that many financial institutions delayed or forgave payments. Brewdog, which is a UK brewery, started making hand sanitizer in its Scottish distillery and gave it away to charities, shelters, NHS staff and hospitals, and anyone in the community who needed or wanted it. And Ocado, which is an online grocer based in the UK, created, in response to nationwide homeschooling that was under effect, created a rapid router program, which is a free educational resource that teaches children to code at home to continue their computer education. So this is the sort of forward-thinking brand behavior that nurtures goodwill and customer loyalty through a crisis. So what we see that businesses are re-emphasizing the role of customer service and human interaction. Consumers are no longer basing loyalty on price and product. Instead, they're staying loyal with companies due to the experience that they receive. And if you don't believe me, you can believe 15,000 people that PwC surveyed who found that 1 in 3 consumers will leave a brand they love after just one bad experience. And 92% would completely abandon a company after 2 or 3 negative interactions. I mean, that bar is very, very high, and you do not have much time to get it right. Human interaction is at the heart of the new relationship, but increasingly what we're finding is digital is the means by which it's delivered. And consumer brands are really embracing this idea and focusing their entire business models around it. So let's consider some examples. One is a fashion brand called Fall Risk. They used to sell their clothing exclusively through a designated hotline, very old-fashioned telephone number. So you'd see the collection online and on Instagram, but you could only buy by calling up the phone number. And you'd be connected with the CEO, the designer, customer service, anybody in the business. And they would have a really good interaction with you and learn more about what you want. Now, the business is selling direct on Shopify now, but it's an interesting way to get started. And let's also look at grocery shopping. Two interesting companies are taking the business model and doing some different things with it. The first is Hungry Root, which is an online service for plant-based food. They create a personalized grocery plan for you based on answers to a quiz that you take at the very beginning of the engagement, so that your preferences and the products that they offer you are very personalized. And then there's Move, which is a new members-only online grocer in the States, which assigns each customer with a personal shopper that you can contact, will help you with your shopping and take you through every step of the journey. Again, that's personal one-to-one interaction to help you do your shopping. I think I would like that very much to come to the UK. So what does that have to do with this lovely painting by Georges Seurat? What you see here is an example of great customer experience means looking at the customer holistically. So this is a painting, again, by Georges Seurat. It's called A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte, and it was painted in 1884. And Georges Seurat is a master of the pointillist school of painting, which shows that this painting is made up of millions of tiny little dots of paint. There is no brush stroke to be found. And what's really fascinating about it is that very much up close, it looks like nothing. It's very hard to get a sense of where it's going or anything. But when you step back and look at all of those tiny dabs of paint, the picture they create is just fabulous. I think it is. I think it's a neat technique of painting. But what it does is it also illustrates the concept. So think about each customer touch point as a dab of Seurat's paint. I mean, there are multiple touch points throughout every user journey. You probably have listed quite a few, such as website, billboard, direct mail, live chat, the packaging, the delivery experience, the phone call when someone has an issue or has a question, emails, referrals, how you are represented on marketplaces, radio advertising, you name it, the touch points are endless. But when you step back, they need to all create a really beautiful picture. So why does this matter? It matters because this is how your consumer is buying from you. And it takes more touch points than you might think to make a sale. Google took a look at this in 2019 and identified that the number of touch points that people needed to make a purchase ranged from 20 for a candy bar to up to 500 to book a flight, which sometimes to me feels like 5,000 to book a flight. Today, customers use an average of between 6 and 8 touch points before making a sale. And in my experience, I think that's a pretty accurate number. But the challenge is that 75% of customers expect a consistent experience whenever they engage and wherever they engage. I mean, if you think about 20 to 500, it's an awful lot of touch points, and they do need to really be in harmony with each other. And also, don't forget that 85% of digital customers start the purchasing workflow on one device, mobile, desktop, tablet, and finish it on another. So no longer is anything seen in a single channel. Omnichannel is the way of the world, and it's worth it. A Harvard Business Review study in 2017 of 46,000 consumers showed that the merging of the physical and digital worlds just was unstoppable. And it's worth so much more than anyone who buys in one single channel. So the stats showed that consumers who purchased across more than 4 channels spent on average 9% more than those who purchased across just one. Now, 9% might not sound like a huge number or very shocking, but actually, when you look at that incrementally across every single transaction, that's a very big number. I'd take it any day of the week. And once they've purchased, shoppers who used multiple touch points logged 23% more shopping trips, repeat shopping trips, than people who simply bought in one channel. I know you've seen this in your own data. I've seen it in the businesses I work with. People who engage in more than one way are much more valuable. So everything we do is about making sure that we can get those engagements everywhere we can. So now here you see a picture of the digital, a typical user journey map, which is much less sexy than the George Seurat painting, I think, but it's a little bit more useful for our purposes. And let's consider how brands are having these conversations across these touch points. So some interesting examples. One is a direct-to-consumer beauty brand called Habit. It is aiming to normalize the routine application of sunscreen. And once consumers buy its number 41 mister, it's a sunscreen mister, it's got an SPF of 41, the brand implements a daily reminder texting system for 21 days to remind you to apply your sunscreen. Why 21 days? Because that's how long it takes to form a habit. See what they did there? Pattern Brands is building a family of brands to help consumers enjoy daily life through rituals and activities at home. And each sub-brand, Equal Parts and Open Spaces, position its cookware and home solutions as ways to de-stress, enjoy everyday moments, and grow a habit and a home. I mean, that's much more than simply buying a piece of Tupperware and a fry pan. This is about creating a holistic way to live life. And it's understanding these different touch points that the customer has along the journey and how to measure the effectiveness of these. And again, this is important. Organizations have found, according to McKinsey, that to leverage customer behavior data to generate behavior insights, they outperform their peers by 85%. If you want to get ahead of the competition, right there, it's all about leveraging the data that you have in your business. So how are brands using this personalized data to win? Well, we know that knowledge is power, and that means knowing your audience. And remember, the audience may have significantly changed over the last year. And I urge you to do some really good data collecting on that side to reinforce any suspicions you may have, or even to contradict some long-held assumptions you might have. I was talking to a CEO of a personal goods brand here in the UK the other day, and he was telling me that they typically do an annual customer survey, but over COVID, they've done 7 surveys. And each time they found out something new and different about their customer. And it's largely because a lot of people knew were coming to the site, were transacting with them, and they really wanted to find out more about them. So I'd urge you to do that, even if you think it's all the same people. I think they're probably coming at this with a little bit of a different mindset. And you can use that understanding of the behavior to be a better partner to them, a better brand, and a more profitable one at that. So you need to ask yourself, what steps are you taking right now that really forms a solid digital strategy? Every action needs to be about developing as a business to better connect with your consumer and to stay relevant. And you need to do this a unified view across all online and physical venue channels. I think it's time for a pop quiz. You should ask yourself now, are you collating the data that you've collected from as many touch points as you can? Are you using these to create a digital profile that can be attached to transactions so you can use follow-up emails, any other kind of personalized communication on the back of that? And are you using this data to empower your employees wherever they are connecting with a customer to understand the holistic behavior? So this means, do the employees know what the previous buying behaviors were, what the other transactions have been across every channel, so that they can click into understanding and having a rapport with that customer right away? And are you capturing and sharing loyalty points across all of these channels? And are you considering loyalty that might not just be about dollars or pounds spent, but is about engagement with the brand? And finally, are you analyzing this data to understand how each channel, not only brick and mortar, is driving revenue to inform strategy and future investments in either permanent pop-up places, any other places where you want to have that interaction with the consumer? I hope you passed the pop quiz. But the bar is set high, as we said. 75% of business buyers expect the companies that they buy from to provide personalized experiences. And they're willing to give data to get that experience. 57% of online buyers are happy to exchange personal data in return for these personalized offers and discounts. I mean, look, just to see it in action, let's consider some brands that are spending billions in creating a personalized experience. One is Netflix. I know it's overused, but it's a brilliant example. I mean, they estimate that 75 to 80% of their viewer activity is driven by recommendation, not somebody going to Netflix to find a particular program. It's all about what the platform serves them. That drives 75 to 80% of the viewing. And the reason that's important to them is because they say it saves the company an estimated $1 billion a year through reduced churn. Because if I'm going on the platform, I'm finding something that's interesting to me that Netflix has recommended. Netflix is more valuable to me and I will not churn. If you take down the dollars spent, it's a lesson that we can all learn from, and in a way that our business can really benefit. On a smaller scale, but no less relevant, there's a brand in the UK called Very, and they're a fashion brand. And they gauge the weather in your local area to send you emails and serve products based on what that weather is that you're experiencing. So if it's raining in London, I'll get an email saying, here are the raincoats we have. But if it's sunny in Sheffield, I'll get an email about a sundress at the same time. And so they're powering that intelligence in that way. And there's a UK and US business called Graze. It's a snack food brand, and they personalize a subscription to send you. And they can deliver snack recommendations comprising around 500 products that make up 200 million possible combinations. And you've got a say in what those combinations are, because it's all about what you like and what you don't. So we've spoken a lot here about what this profile is and that it's very important. And it really provides a structure to the marketing plan, and it helps you understand what your customer is looking for, what matters to them, and how best to speak to them to make them feel valued and engaged. So just to recap, it means that you can create customer segments to gain a clear understanding of who your customers are. And I'm reminded of an example. I used to work for a bed linen business, and we had two very big sales a year, one in January, one in June. And we always knew that there was overlap between our full price buyer, our customer, and our sale customer. And we never quite knew how much. We thought, maybe 30, 40% overlapped. We found out that actually that number was 10%. Only 10% of customers were both full price and sale. The rest of the time, they were completely discreet. And the reason that was important to us is we really we personalized our communications so that we weren't advertising sale product to full price buyers and therefore leaving margin on the table. And we also didn't bother sending full price to our sale buyers. They were only interested in sale product, and they were very loyal and lucrative customers. And they felt that we were communicating them in a way that made the brand more valuable to them. So you can tailor this content by understanding these segments. You can make informed, data-driven decisions, which can lead to enhanced response rates when you do send these communications, when you personalize the homepage of the website, all of which makes you a bigger, better, smarter business. So remember that everyone on the front line, customer service reps, store associates, live chat operators, they need to build a holistic profile of the customer. Each one of them is collecting a data point that the other might not have, whether it's behavioral, transactional, whatever it may be, preferential. Give them a way to collect that data and allow them to see that their job is incredibly important in combining all of those elements together to create this picture. So we've got our customer profiles, but we're thinking about how are they interacting with each other and how are you cultivating a community? I mean, I've been doing a lot of work with brands and loyalty marketing, but it's really about community building, and it's quite different now than it ever used to be. I mean, it's not a new concept, transforming your loyalty program into a community of people who really love the brand, but it's evolving quickly into something that's much more powerful to deploy. It's word of mouth on steroids, we know that. But people are really valuing the community where they're selling to each other, they're supporting each other much more than they ever used to. And if you can harness that effectively and scale it in a different way, you have a really incredible and unparalleled tool that will help you drive transformation and growth. And I've seen this happen. And community no longer means just people who've bought from you. It's about other people who are engaged in the world that you live in as a brand. And think about who's interacting with you and how do you keep track of those people who might have only bought once or twice, but who refer you to every person they've ever met, who advocate on your behalf across every social media platform. And with those activities in mind are worth much more to you than simply what they've purchased over the last year. So how do you look at that? Let's look at some examples of brands that are really embodying this. So consider Planks Clothing. Planks, and I work closely with Planks, is a British ski wear brand. And they're very much driven by the mission to ski sustainably. And this mission is why it's been able to collect the following that it has. It sells parkas, base layers, but it's also about so much more. I mean, the brand's community is interested in life on the mountain and how to preserve that mountain so that next generations can ski the same way that we are. So it's about cleaning up the mountain. It's about really respecting nature. And that's the mindset that you come to Planks with. And those are the kinds of, that's the clothing you want to wear. And that's the brand value that you want to deploy and where you want to place your investment. Nike, again, massive company, but they've done a brilliant job of really creating a relevant community. I like to consider myself a runner in a very loose term, but I consume Nike's guided runs all the time. Their library of content that they've built up that is free of charge and the tools that they put together that allow me to track my running are really unparalleled. They're absolutely brilliant. And while it's free, I still feel a sense of loyalty to Nike because I trust them. I think they do good work. I love their product and therefore I'm brand loyal. But I also tell everybody I know, like I am right now, about how great I think the Nike Run Club app is. And that word of mouth is valuable. And a final example on the smaller end of the scale, there's a British startup called Thrift Plus, and they're a secondhand clothing marketplace that supports whatever personal charity that you like to support. And it adds gamification elements to the process of donating and selling clothes. It has a brilliant user experience and it's thought of every little single detail. And they really do bring you into their community and how they live their values. And it makes you feel good about being a part of it. So this is about brand advocacy. And I work with a tech startup called Duel, and they are a brand advocacy platform. And it's a new way of sort of weaponizing your advocates. They urge businesses to consider their advocates in a new way, where it's not just about sales, but it is about influence and recommendation and amplification, as we did speak about. Another tech platform that allows consumers to engage directly with each other is Tokiwoki. And they're a French business and they're used by Galeries Lafayette, which is a big French department store. And where they've got people on the platform, they're not employees of Galeries Lafayette, but they know product areas well. They want to help other consumers navigate the website, find things that they're looking for, and weigh in with product recommendations. And this is all hands off by Galeries Lafayette, except that they provide the tool and the platform that allow these consumer advocates to speak to each other. And if you can deploy your user base correctly and give customers the proper tools, you can get to the point where if somebody slams your brand online, 5 people come back and say, actually, I think the brand is brilliant and here's why. I mean, you can get customers policing these kinds of situations. I've seen it happen. And it's incredibly powerful. So we've got a very strong advocacy element going on here, and it's got to be fed by content marketing on steroids. And again, that's content marketing's been around for a long time, but we're seeing brands get really smart about generating user-generated content and leveraging that back out across the social media channels. And it's about delivering valuable and meaningful content. Again, we just talked about Nike and how they have the Run Club and tons of guided runs because it's useful and relevant and personalized. I mean, the case for content marketing is great when you consider the Lego movie. It was out years ago, but it is one of the most incredible pieces of content marketing the world's ever seen. And when shortly after its release, after the movie came out, Lego became one of the most powerful, took over Mattel as far as being the biggest toy company out there. So there, it works. So you just you now need to go create a movie of your brand. So that's all. Anyway, being on steroids, content marketing on steroids means looking for different ways to generate that content and leveraging it in a way that enhances your brand awareness. So it doesn't require a dedicated newsroom of people, and all brand needs are a couple of people who are really smart at manipulating content, getting it from the community and putting it out there. And every brand has advocates who love to see their name in lights. And it doesn't mean that you as a brand need to give up control. You can still help write it, edit it, polish it, and manage it. But give your community a way to start creating some of that content. But remember, it's not only, it has to be a dialogue, not a broadcast. It has to be two-way. So you've got to give your consumers authentic two-way conversations, ways to give back and to really let you know what they think and how they're thinking it. So what can we do today? There is no presentation that it will ever be considered complete if it doesn't quote Sun Tzu's Art of War. So I'm here with the obligatory, not quotation, but summary that says that in the Art of War, Sun Tzu recognized that chaos presents opportunity for innovation. And I absolutely think that that's the time we're in right now. And this crisis, as I mentioned at the very beginning, comes with a huge silver lining. It's the opportunity for brands to focus on more than just survival. It's to find direction, unleash creativity and potential, grow real loyalty, and evolve new business models and open up to new markets in line with a changing world. And it all means creating a better customer experience and a powerful roadmap for success. And as we mentioned, digital is not the only way to put the customer first, nor is it the one single thing you have to be doing, but digital is the glue that really helps keep it all together. Engaging on a much broader level with your customer is the way forward, and it's exciting, but it's vital that you live it and breathe it. So what are some steps that you can take right now? One, you can act like a detective, collect that data from many, many touch points, uncover how all the pieces fit together, and learn to ask the right questions and really listen to your customer. Doing that is so powerful. Broaden your mindset and expand your view. Consider all of the interactions that you could or could have. Face-to-face is important, online is important, your advertising is important. You really need to get to the bottom and understand how is your consumer interacting with each one of those pieces, and how can you act like Surratt and create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. Build a community. You're on the front line, so start putting feelers out and think about that opportunity mindset when it comes to ideas for content. And finally, be brave and be flexible. Brave to be open to knowing that this is a new world and the old rules of engagement don't apply, and be flexible to know that you need to change, adapt, really go gung-ho with one thing that you might not have thought of, or really pull back on the other thing that you really held dear and thought that was really going to work, but all the evidence shows you it doesn't. I mean, now is the time to completely get rid of any kind of boundaries or restrictions, and look at the world in a new way. But most of all, what you can do in 2021 is pick up your paintbrush, choose your colors, and hit the canvas, because 2021 is looking bright. Thanks for spending your time with me, and have a really great rest of the day.
Thank you, Gabrielle, so much for such an engaging and thought-provoking keynote session for us today. And thank you to everyone who's chosen to join us today at Digital Virtualocity. We are thrilled you've chosen to spend some time with us. I am Laura McHenry. I look after marketing in Europe and the Middle East and Africa for Tealium. And I am joined both by Gabrielle and also by Tealium's very own CMO, Heidi Bullock. Thank you both so much. And this is a brilliant opportunity for us to dive into a few of the topics that Gabrielle covered in her presentation, just a little bit more deeply, and get some more analysis and insight around there. So time both short and precious. I'm going to dive straight in, Gabrielle, to you and say there were so many brilliant, innovative ideas in that presentation about the ways brands can engage their customers better, new channels, setting up a community, brand advocacy. My question would be, how does a brand make an assessment on what's really right for them and avoid the marketing thing that we've all seen where people just chase after the latest sort of shiny toy?
It comes down to really knowing who your customer is. I mean, first of all, I would say that the new shiny thing, sometimes it's fun to experiment with those things. If it's low cost, it's easy to implement, because you never know what could stick. So let's make a designation between trying things just for the sake of it, just because you want to be current and new, and trying things because you think it might resonate, but it doesn't. So I would always foster and encourage a testing mindset that says, let's try this. But truly, there are a million things you could try. So in order to figure out which 10 you should try, it's really understanding who the heck you're trying to talk to. And maybe you try different things for different segments. But as long as you know exactly what segment you're targeting with what, then that gives you a better scope, a frame of reference, so that you're more directed in your experimentation. Again, it's ruthless prioritization. I absolutely encourage trying things out that are new, but it's, we've all had that thing where the CEO wakes up in the morning, calls us and says, oh, I think TikTok, that's what we should be doing. And you just think, okay, maybe. If you've got the audience that's on TikTok, sure. If you don't, maybe not. However, how quick is it to figure out if TikTok's right for you? It's probably not that big a deal. So you could do it pretty quickly. So that's my 2 cents on new shiny things.
Thanks, Gabrielle.
Why not try it though sometimes? Because it can actually end up working. So you never know. But the good news is a lot of the things today, especially if they're digital, it's easy to test out.
Yeah. Very.
But that brings us to my next question, Heidi, which is, with all of these new touch points that we're potentially talking about here, is there not a risk that we're actually going to create some kind of data Frankenstein monster that actually has a negative effect on the customer experience as opposed to a positive effect? How do we balance that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I actually think that a lot of organizations, for better or worse, have that today. And it's a tough problem, right? Because I think a lot of us were in, a rapid growth mode. A lot of companies, they might go through an acquisition, a merger. So they might have, let's assume under best circumstances, their tech stack's actually great. But again, like over time, due to growth, due to many different reasons, you kind of ultimately start to have these silos where you've got a team that's thinking, we're mobile. The other team's like, great, we handle call center. Another team's like, we handle web. And they are operating in silos. And I think a lot of companies, for better or for worse, have that today. But we do see, especially I think with, the pandemic kind of brought this on, a lot of companies really had to rethink digital experience. And so for me, a lot of what I talk to companies about is start with thinking about where your data is today, even if it's in silos. Start somewhere and start to think about how you can really bring that data together and have one particular owner and have one particular place where all that data is going, so you are not creating these disparate experiences, because that's almost worse. I mean, all of us can think about where even you might go to a physical store, you purchase something, you go home, maybe you're watching Netflix, you're on your computer and you're like, wow, I just got a discount coupon for the thing I just bought. And that's actually a terrible experience. So I think that that's something a lot of companies, for better or for worse, had to think about this year.
Mm. You'll have seen this a lot, Gabrielle, as well, I imagine, in the e-commerce industries that you work in.
Oh my gosh, we see it all the time. And it's what's bad is that you see the solutions or these data pools happening that are really behind the scenes, that because of the way they're constructed, they end up inhibiting the proper user experience, because the business user is never in the meetings, the customer is never in the meetings, and it's always done from the inside out, never from the outside in. And so I think Heidi's point of trying to get a singular view on this is hugely important, but make sure that you've got the right people in the room to help influence those decisions.
Mm.
I just want to add on to that. I mean, I totally agree. And I think in many cases in business, it's always about like bringing people along for the journey. Customer data to me is, it's a team sport. And there may be a particular owner or a group that, ultimately is the buyer of technology, and that's fine. But I think to Gabrielle's point, it's like, make sure that you have the right stakeholders in the room and everybody understands, okay, great, this is how we're going to use the data. This is the data that actually exists within the company today. These are the types of data that we're thinking about maybe for the future. I mean, there's companies out there, maybe they're dipping their toe in the water with IoT or something else. And you always want to make sure that you have the right people there so that ultimately the plan works moving forward. And I think there's so many cases where it's maybe one particular group that makes those decisions, and that just doesn't work long term.
We had an example of that. If I could just jump in with a quick example. So I work with the Tate galleries, the art galleries in the UK. And they have a legacy system. I think at one point they had about 11 different databases from all over, all different galleries, different membership reward schemes, membership schemes, you name it. There was and there were different opt-ins for each one. So you couldn't market to this entire community in a way that made sense. You couldn't communicate with them because some pools had rigorous opt-in and were fully GDPR compliant. Others had very hazy and even contradictory opt-ins or opt-outs, marketing permissions, communication permissions that required a year-long project to create the single voice of customer in a way that was GDPR compliant, but also that allowed the business to function in the best way possible, the most efficient way possible, so that you could speak to different databases about a holistic Tate offering. I think that's probably one of the most extreme cases I've seen, but it really, and it's also because silos were ingrained, and because when it was done, the right people weren't in the room. It wasn't anybody's particular failure. It was simply that it wasn't thought of holistically enough. But now it's much better.
One of the things that you talked about that I love is that, consumers do seem to want more and more of this feeling of a personal interaction with the brand, a human connection. I'm not talking, please press 5 if you want to, we want to move past that. But my question is, how is that scalable without employing 65 million people, Gabrielle? How do we scale that feeling of personal interaction?
Well, a couple of things. One is you get some smart, the AI right now is there's a tolerance for it, and it can work to really cut down the funnel so that you can get people where they need to be more quickly and easily than they could have otherwise, even with a smart system that isn't with a human on the other side. But then you do bring people in at the point where they need to be brought in, or you make it easy for people to talk to other people. And I will also tell you that it's also a matter of framing. So if you consider one of the stats that we talked about was that 1/3 of customers will leave after one bad interaction. If you think that's 33% churn of customer, not to mention all the efforts that you're making to acquire new customers, but you've got to replace 33% of your customer base every year. If you apply your cost per acquisition to 33% of those people, you come up with a number that will employ quite a few human customer service people along the way. So if you look at it that way, it's a no-brainer. And you don't need legions of people. You need them doing the right things in a smart way that are going to have the most impact at the touch points that you know your customers really care about. So I think it's really about looking at it in that way, looking at your marketing budget as a whole and what you're trying to do as a business, and how having that human interaction can both lower your cost per acquisition and also really, really improve your retention.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And it's about having a proactive approach, because it's just, as you said, I mean, there's too many options for people today. There's too many alternatives. And so it ends up being more expensive in the long run. And so I hope that people watching this today, if you come away with one thing, it's just, kind of start small, but start, do something today and be proactive, because ultimately I think a lot of folks might put things off because, exactly to your point, they think, oh, it's going to be expensive. The alternative is much more expensive. And by then, like, time is going by. And I think in this whole, kind of the world we're in today, time is just not our friend. We want to make sure that we're thinking ahead and being proactive, because there's too many other options for buyers.
And I think it's interesting that you say there to just start, Heidi, just get on the road, just start doing something. Because I had a conversation with the CMO the other week, and they're talking about the great innovations and things like you were talking about, Gabrielle, in your presentation, but said, honestly, I'm concerned that our data isn't even in good enough shape to send out the right kind of cart abandonment emails. So I think we need to as well address, Heidi, people who are maybe at the very beginning of their digital journey thinking, oh, do I really want to do this? This all looks very expensive and painful to me.
It's true. And I think, to be fair, a lot of companies in technology, they have a way of sometimes making this problem worse, because it feels really daunting. It's like, hey, you can have this nirvana if you do all of these wild things and spend money on key platforms. And I would tell people, it's just like anything. It's like, start somewhere and start small. And there's kind of three things that I think through. And this is true, I think, with a lot of different types of technology. Number one, I think it's important to, as we talked about, assemble the right team, right? And this isn't one person or one group. It's probably folks that are in marketing. It's probably, some customer success folks or customer experience people. It's probably your, IT team. Make sure that you have a sense of where customer data is coming from today. And I would just say, start with a great collection strategy. Make sure that you can think about, wow, we have a good way of incorporating our web data. If you have a mobile app, how are you looking at that data? Some people, and this is true at a lot of companies, they have data that isn't a data lake that's very important, but maybe it's hard to access. Think about, do an audit where all your data sources are, and then just come up with a very simple plan. Great, we're going to make sure that we have the right data, we're collecting it, we have ownership in a team that's thinking about this. And that doesn't have to be a daunting process. And then just figure out, where are the use cases? I like this. You don't have to do everything, do the right thing. Maybe it's shopping cart abandonment, and that's your win. And that's where you really spend your time for the next, maybe it's a few months, but that's okay, because improvements there could be very sizable. A lot of people this last year, we recommended focus on a really great retention use case, because as we said, you spend all this money to get these customers, don't lose them. Don't have sort of a funnel or a system that's leaky. That's very wasteful. So maybe it's just a very simple loyalty use case where you keep your valuable customers. So again, it's just understand what you have, where your data is, think about your team and ownership, and then pick a simple use case to get started with. I think if you can do that, that's a really great first set of steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think investing in what you mentioned as an audit, that's often a very good place to start. And an audit is not, particularly if you're just at the beginning of your digital journey, it's a worthwhile investment, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an expensive thing to do. And I would argue, if it is expensive, I think there's something wrong. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's not going to be, 50,000 pounds or anything like that. It's something that just says, here's where it all sits. Then at least you have a little bit more comfort about what you can do next. Because the example you mentioned, the person who doesn't know if their data is even good enough to send, well, you have to know if your data isn't good enough to send. It's good if you know it isn't, then you can get going.
That's right. And if you're asking the question, it's probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'd add that I think sometimes people fall into the hole of believing that tech is the answer to everything. And I'm sitting here obviously waiting to get fired by Heidi for this, but tech is an enabler, right? You can have the best technology in the world plumbed into your systems, but if you don't have the people and you don't have the processes and the understanding to support it, then you've got to have all three together. You need the tech, you need the people, and you need the process to see the whole picture and make it work. Yeah. I'm going to ask a controversial question now to Gabrielle. You're so passionate about brands bringing their real selves and living their values and being something that consumers can really identify with on an emotional level. You share my values, brand. Do we think that is really key in the customer experience, or is it more a nice to have that people could maybe drop off the bottom of the list? How important is it really?
It's a brilliant question, and it's gotten some scrutiny. Actually, I'd say it's not. I do believe it very much for the right brands. It isn't appropriate for every brand. I'm going to qualify that. I do think that the next generation of customers do look to every brand they interact with to understand more about them. Are they doing things ethically? Do they treat their employees correctly? Do they are they into climate change? So that standard is being applied across the board, whether it's a utility that a moving company you engage with, a cleaning service, it doesn't matter. People are asking more and more questions, which I think are brilliant. So to that end, a brand has to have the answers to those questions, and a brand has to be able to articulate where they stand on those particular hygiene factors. Then there's the next level, which says, I want my brand to stand for something. And that, I think, is very appropriate if a brand is in an area where they're sort of walking the walk or talking the talk, I should say. So let's take the example I used, Planks, the ski wear brand. You can buy a brilliant ski wear brand. It doesn't have to have a purpose or a mission or anything. It'll keep you warm on the mountain. But increasingly, it's about thinking about where your brand sits in the whole rest of the world. So if it's about a winter snow sport, and also, first of all, fashion is definitely coming under the lens. There has to be proper authenticity about what you're doing, about your carbon footprint, and the fact that it is such a contributor to global warming. That I think is a non-negotiable. Fast fashion aside, I mean, it really is. And then then there's the whole sustainability with consumer goods. It's a much stronger push, I think, that people have to have a story about it. And then you think, well, how about then the world you're living in? And so Planks makes the ski wear that is out of recycled fabric, not exclusively, but a lot of it. But then it's also about saying, let's give back to the mountain, the mountain that we ski down, that we take benefit from, that we probably trash because we are on it all the time. So what kind of programs are we investing in and contributing to help preserve that environment in an ecologically sound way? And so that I do think is becoming more and more important. I think there's certain standards that different brands have to adhere to depending on where that brand operates, who their customer base is. So I don't think it's equally across the board, to your point, but I think brands need to understand if amongst their target set, it is an important factor or not.
Mm. Fantastic. And, we're nearly out of time, unbelievably. So I'm going to ask you both one final question. Heidi, let's start with you. I'd like you both to tell me what the one piece of advice is that you would give to brands to either incrementally or even explosively improve the experience they're delivering to their customers.
Mm-hmm. My answer would be, I would definitely just start with customer data and making sure that you have a thoughtful strategy there, which And the reason I say that is we all want to have these really intimate personal conversations with all our buyers. Like that would be the ideal utopia, right? You think about having a conversation with somebody at your corner store. And for most of us, we don't have 10 customers. We have, thousands of customers. So you need the ability to do that through data that scales. And so to me, I also think many times, like to Gabrielle's point, which she was just talking about, you need to know your buyers' preferences. Do they care about environmental issues? What does matter to them, so you can make sure your brand is being forward thinking and aligning to what they care about. And not everyone's going to tell you that. You need to be able to look at other signals to better understand how to deliver the right experiences. So my bit of advice is, again, just going back to really thinking through a thoughtful customer data strategy, making sure you have the right data and making sure you're using it. And most importantly, that somebody in your organization owns that and thinks through it.
Gabrielle?
Yeah, I echo the idea of having somebody in the organization that, and I would change it, or I would add to that to say, for me, it's about the customer experience. So make sure you know beyond a shadow of a doubt what your customer experiences with your brand and where they do it. And so the really ugly user experience map, where all the data touch points are, I think that can be an incredibly useful piece of information and tool to use in the business. So if you haven't mapped that yet, I would do that tomorrow. And you do that by getting all different functional representation within a room. You get someone from finance, you get someone from the warehouse, you get someone from the delivery company, you get someone from the call center, on and on and on. Get everybody in a room. You map out all of the different ways that the customer is touching with your brand in those different channels, different pieces of communication, different moments where, oh, I have to take this back to return it. Where is that interaction happening, and what is the dialogue at that time? And is there a way our brand can be better represented? Know where all of those touch points are. I guarantee you'll find a few that you never knew existed, but that do. And make sure that the experience is consistent and consistently brilliant.
Wow. Thank you both so much. That is the end of our keynote session today. Thank you hugely to Gabrielle Hase for her brilliant keynote speech. Thank you to Heidi for chipping in there with some fantastic insight. And thank you to everyone watching for choosing to spend time at Digital Virtualocity today. We really hope you enjoyed the rest of your sessions.